Hello and welcome once again to my online content for my music humanities class. I'm Brad. Today we're going to start talking about the Renaissance. We've been through the medieval period. Let me just bring up the timeline, kind of show you where we've been, where we're going. All right, so we started out, talking about the early medieval period and, the Gregorian chant. Then went through Hildegard and those Notre Dame, Gothic guys. And we wound up by talking about the polyphonic music of Philippe de Vitry and Guillaume de Marchand, and how that kind of filled out the development of music and in our history. Now, about 1400, everybody woke up the next day, and it was the Renaissance. And I want to start by contrasting what was going on in the late medieval period with some early Renaissance composers, because there is a big difference. It's about 100 years, but yeah, music was evolving. I want to play you that mass that we did last time by Guillaume de Marchand. Let me just play a little bit of the Kyrie of that. Okay, let me go over here. And if you remember, this is what it sounded like. So it has some of those features that we discovered about medieval masses and medieval music. Again, it's very polyphonic, but it just kind of meanders along, and it has kind of the weird harmonies and everything like that. Now I'm going to play you a mass by a guy we're going to talk about in a bit. This is the Kyrie. It's about 100 years after Marchand. And listen to the difference, if you can kind of hear it. Again, the harmonies are still a little strange sometimes, but notice that the phrasing is much more kind of human. It's almost like an utterance, you take a breath and you let it out, and it comes and it stops, And the harmonies during the course of the polyphony are a bit more natural to us too. The ending is still a little weird. Again, there's that satanic thing we'll talk about in a second. But also bear in mind, these guys still kind of had to play the church game a little bit. And, even though this was a nice Renaissance mass, early Renaissance mass, here's what happened. Yeah, they still put in that good old-timey chant. And what's interesting is when you hear the chant, you can actually hear the melody, and the melody was used in the polyphonic section before. We're still employing that device that we talked about earlier of the cantus firmus. Only now the cantus firmus has been spread throughout the piece a little bit, and it's kind of, integrated into the fabric of the polyphony. I'll just put down polyphony here just so you remember. This is a big feature of this music. Okay, and in fact, a very specific kind of polyphony was being explored in the Renaissance. And I want to play another piece by this composer. And I want you to listen closely to sort of what's happening in this, okay? Let me start up here. Here we go. Now, could you hear how the composer was constructing the polyphony? Listen to it again. I'm going to run it back to the beginning, and here you go. It's right there. This is a particular type of polyphony that was, it's been heard before, and I'll talk about that in a second. It's called imitative polyphony. Basically, you have a melody and then you repeat the melody later. And in fact, when I said we'd heard it before, we heard it in this. You know, when it got rolling in the round later on, you'll hear, you know, that they had all kinds of... You know, it was like row, row, row your boat all over again. Okay, the idea that you take this melody and you construct it in such a fashion that the melody can then harmonize with itself, that's what the name of this imitative polyphony game is. And composers really, really liked it. I mean, first of all, they're having to come up with ways of extending the music, you know, ways of making it still interesting, because there is that, you know, entertainment value, the stuff that Lee and Ann was plumbing back in the Notre Dame period, you know, and they're now drawing upon some features of music that that the medieval composers didn't quite employ. In particular, they're building up their harmonies using things now called chords. Okay? And basically, that's just take a note, add another note, then add another note. You've got a chord. You know, so all these are chords. And an essential ingredient of that chord in Renaissance music is not that fifth, but adding that harmony. 1, 2, 3. Using that third. That was the thing that was considered satanic. But now it's being okay. You know, it's becoming part of the lexicon of what's proper and what sounds good. And it sounds good to us too. Now, because they're including that, they can start constructing things that end the phrases in a nice way. These are called cadences. And basically, a cadence draws upon our sense of how music goes and our sense of how music is constructed to produce an ending point. Let me give you an example. If I do this, you want it to end. You want it to go here. That's the cadence. So composers, they're using these, what they call cadential formula, to produce these nice endings. And they can then section up the music and keep the interest going. You know, you want to go, oh, what's next? What's next? You know, and that's what's really kind of driving this. So imitative polyphony combined with these cadences, you've got some nice sounding Renaissance music. Well, who's this guy that we've been playing? Okay, he's an early Renaissance composer named Guillaume. Again, seems to be a popular name. Dufay, and he lived right at the very end of the medieval period, 1397 to 1474. So again, he was a big force early in kind of the Renaissance era. Let me bring up the timeline again here, and this time I'll show you. So I'm going to kind of put him as being active right about like 1450 or so, because that would be the midpoint of his life, you know. And he did something kind of intriguing that we're going to start seeing a lot more of with our composers. I mean, first of all, what he did was move. He was actually born up in the northern part of Europe, where a lot of the musical action has been taking place. He was born outside Brussels, and you know, again, there was a lot of money floating around Paris and things like that, but the Renaissance saw Italy become ascendant. It became a hub of commerce, a hub of thinking. You know, all the stuff you associate with the Renaissance, you generally probably think of Italy. You know, Leonardo, Michelangelo, the great Italian artists, the great Italian thinkers. So here's old Dufay up here, you know, learning his music, and he's going, you know what, the weather really sucks up here. So he decamped and went and lived in central Italy. He actually became a priest, so he was also very affiliated with the church, but that didn't stop him from making money on the side. In fact, this piece that I just played you with the imitative polyphony, that was done for the wedding of the daughter of one of the Malatestas. The Malatestas, the Sforza, the Medici. These were the great families in Italy that had much power, much money, and they really bought into this whole art and music thing. So they commissioned works from composers like Dufay. Again, this was for their wedding, and they did pretty well for themselves. I'll play one more piece of Dufay, and then we'll probably stop and take a breather here. And this is a motet, O Beati Sebastiani, O beautiful Saint Sebastian. And this probably would have been done as part of a religious observance, a mass, maybe a celebration, something like that. And just give a listen to how sort of more human this music sounds to us than the medieval stuff we've been playing. So really, really lovely music. I'm just playing excerpts in these videos. You can find all of these online on my website if you want to hear the whole pieces. And again, I encourage you to listen to these because they're really nice. One thing you probably didn't notice about this, but there is something that was part of the fabric of the music, that da 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 da. Dufay was one of the last of the composers that were studying to use isorhythms, the thing that was pioneered by Leonan and Periton to extend their music. So he's drawing upon a number of tricks in his toolbox, imitative polyphony, cadences, isorhythms. And again, this is all part of how composers are kind of keeping the story going, keeping the music interesting, keeping people wanting to hear more. And we'll continue in the future.